Out of the 1974 Cyclone Tracy tragedy developed a mammoth task for the Australian Navy. The RAN was called on to provide help and comfort quickly to the city of Darwin in a relief effort codenamed Operation Navy Help. The first of 8 major ships to enter the port of Darwin was the Cairns-based survey ship HMAS Flinders. She sailed 2,000 kilometres to Darwin to check the safety of the port shipping channels for commercial shipping, for HMAS Brisbane, the first destroyer to arrive, and for the other Royal Australian Navy ships which would follow soon after. HMAS Brisbane was the first RAN ship to leave Sydney after sailors were hurriedly recalled from Christmas leave. One of its first tasks was to provide a new communications link with the rest of Australia. The next ship would be the 20,000-ton aircraft carrier, HMAS Melbourne. With her came more than 1,000 men and hundreds of tons of supplies. Within 60 minutes, more than 400 men were ferried ashore from the carrier. Helicopters from the Melbourne ran a hectic shuttle service from ship to shore. The Melbourne took 7 Wessex helicopters, the type which in the past had normally spent its time on anti-submarine warfare or on sea-air rescue work. Later, another 2 helicopters would arrive on board the destroyer tender HMAS Stalwart. The dominating feeling that met the Naval Task Force was one of staggering devastation. It was devastation on a scale unappreciated by those who had not lived through the Christmas Day horror called Cyclone Tracy. As the first work crew surveyed the damage, other RAN ships arrived with much-needed manpower to join the workforce. For all the crews, the Darwin devastation appeared unreal. A city of 45,000 people living in the isolation of Australia's north had been torn apart by a cyclone with winds ranging beyond 200 kilometres an hour. One of the more unpleasant tasks that had to be done quickly was to rid the city of rotting food, particularly in big supermarkets where large quantities were lying. All food had to go in case it produced disease that would compound the agonies of a city already stricken. While people in the rest of Australia gave food to help Darwin's population, work teams in the city disposed of the city's suspect food. Areas were sprayed with disinfectant and completely cleaned down. The hot, humid weather made the task urgent, important, unpleasant. The real tragedy of Darwin was the human suffering, rather than the lost property. Underneath Darwin Wharf, below the water, lay the 150-ton patrol boat HMAS Arrow, driven there with the loss in life of 2 of its crew. Naval divers worked with assistance from other craft to drag free the wrecked patrol boat. Operation Navy Help would not have been possible without the helicopters. While the big transport aircraft of the Royal Australian Air Force, the support aircraft of the Navy, civilian aircraft and other vehicles transported 35,000 homeless citizens south, the blue and white helicopters provided an invaluable service to the city. Their movements, and those of Operation Navy Help overall, were directed by Rear Admiral David Wells, the flag officer commanding the Australian fleet, who worked with the naval officer commanding North Australia, Captain Eric Johnson, himself a Darwin resident. The tasks contained in Operation Navy Help were innumerable. Clearing of debris was important, but no more so than making homes safe again. The nerve centre of the operation was at the temporary naval headquarters located at the damaged home of the area's senior naval officer. After the home had been cleared of wreckage and debris, it became an operations centre for the Navy's biggest peacetime task. Day long, requests for help were received and processed. This was where the day's work was planned and problems ironed out. Here it was decided how many men and helicopters would work on a particular task on a particular day. To thrash out operating problems, 2 conferences each day gave brief reports on progress and problems. In the field, sailors cleared rubble in hot, humid summer weather. Their first tasks took them into the hard-hit areas of Casuarina, Nightcliff and Rapid Creek. The work crews helped re-roof homes, chopped down and removed many of the thousands of damaged trees. Teams of sailors sifted through wreckage and rubble to help in Australia's biggest clean-up operation. There wasn't a part of Darwin City that was untouched. Everywhere was devastation. After the clearing operations, rubbish had to be buried, again to prevent disease breaking out. Naval teams were broken into small groups to handle their tasks. Some handled rescue, some demolition, others food distribution, while others were tasked to help restore electricity. One job was the safeguarding of valuable property found on the sites of demolished or badly damaged houses. The valuables were taken to a lost property centre in the grounds of the temporary naval headquarters for registration. At the Work Assistance Office, requests for help were processed and allotted a priority. The requests from the public helped determine what tasks would be carried out during a particular day, what teams would be needed, what stores were required, and what helicopter runs would be necessary. From the destroyer tender HMAS Stalwart, tons of stores were unloaded and taken to points around the city. The 10,500-ton ship had been loaded in Sydney with supplies that ranged up to the size of electrical generators. And as well as her supplies, teams of men left the ship daily to carry out new tasks under Operation Navy Help. Some of the requests for help were vital, some were unusual. There was an urgent plea from the East Arm leper colony, which had been hit by the fury of the cyclone. Almost all its buildings were demolished and essential services were at a standstill. It was in danger of closing down completely unless help was quickly given. Teams from 2 ships, the Melbourne and the Stalwart, were allotted the task of restoring services. Their job was to re-establish power and repair essential facilities. With that job finished, there were hundreds more to start. The personnel of the Australian fleet in Darwin work whether in the city, in the suburbs, or along the foreshore. Emergency repairs were made on fishing craft to make safe again the area for normal work. Operation Navy Help was, in many ways, a helicopter-orientated operation. The blue and white British-built Wessex helicopters worked as aerial cranes, as people ferries, as freight vehicles, as search and rescue craft, and as reconnaissance helicopters. The Wessex were fueled and secured at their task's end on board the aircraft carrier. Darwin people will not forget quickly the Christmas when Tracy came. Neither will those who went to Darwin forget scenes like these at Darwin Airport. The devastation shocked even those who went to the city, prepared to see the effects of a disastrous cyclone. Yet close to the devastation was an example of what Darwin building of the future might well be. Buildings which are designed to withstand far more than can normally be expected when the eye of a cyclone like Tracy passes close by. The Darwin of tomorrow will take many years to achieve, but many of the lessons learned during the hours of battering from the winds of Cyclone Tracy will be incorporated into the buildings of the future Darwin. The work and difficulties experienced in the Darwin operation have provided many lessons for those who have to provide help in emergency situations where normal services have ceased to function. Early communications were difficult, and new channels, such as using the members of the Women's Royal Australian Naval Service as a motorcycle messenger corps, bridged the early days before telephone and radio links could be restored. The cost of Cyclone Tracy will never be accurately known, but the tragedy took more than 50 lives, and almost all buildings were damaged, with more than 80% of domestic buildings being destroyed or made unlivable. Operation Navy Help was only a part of the task which sought to put life back into a dying city. Yet it was a most important task because of its timing. The speed of response and the effectiveness of the work crews put meaning into the Navy's biggest operation for many years. Operation Navy Help.